So today is all about making and receiving offers. And so what we're going to be talking about specifically today is about running your business. So understanding what this looks like of showing buyers houses and then negotiating the actual contracts themselves. So understanding the offer process is very important, especially when it comes time to translate to your seller, right? So the buyer makes the initial offer, of which the seller can then respond in one of three ways. They can accept the offer, which then begins the contract to close process. We can counter the offer, which is to then go into some kind of negotiation with buyer and seller on specific terms, or they can reject the offer outright, of which the buyer agent contacts the listing agent to learn more. Don't always assume that no means no. However, this is one of the processes that can absolutely happen. So in order to prepare for the offer in your toolkit, there is a checklist on how to prepare the offer. You'll notice that it is in your Ignite checklist, the toolkit, but this is also just letting you know. So you're going to obtain the buyer's pre-approval letter from their lender, right? So your client's offer will be more attractive to the seller if a pre-approval letter is submitted at the same time. Understanding that this almost becomes a non-negotiable in today's market, we definitely want to make sure that that is taken care of. To produce a comparative market analysis for your client so that they feel comfortable and confident with the purchase price that they should be making on the offered amount on the contract. Review the tax records for information about pricing history, see how long they've owned the property, right? One of the things that happens with this, not often, but especially if you have someone who's buying with FHA, let's say that the property was purchased and flipped, then we have to make sure that that was owned by the seller for a minimum of 90 days so that that process can happen. Another version of this is also the opposite of where someone might have purchased it a year ago or 18 months ago, and they've done nothing to it besides just allow natural appreciation to happen. So taking some of those things into consideration can absolutely be helpful when positioning your buyer with making an offer. Then you want to ensure that the property is still actually available. If a client is looking on Zillow or somewhere else, it's very well possible that it's already under contract, or worse, you might be in a multiple offer situation of which the listing agent doesn't even let you know that the seller has accepted another offer. You wake up curious about if there was an update, you send the listing agent, hey, just checking in on the offer that we sent, and you look on the MLS and you see that it's been changed to pending. Now, this does sometimes happen, and so being aware of that. Do check in on the rest of that checklist in your toolkit, and let me know if you have any challenges. What I'm going to do at our break is I'm going to make sure that we have an opportunity to adjust the toolkit. If anyone needs it, I will resend the link. So now it's up to actually pricing and dealing with writing the offer, right? So we want to make sure that our price and terms are set. So we want to consult with the buyer to arrive on the most logical offering based on your CMA. You're going to use the seller's disclosure. So review the disclosure. The disclosure itself, if it's a good agent, the disclosure itself should be on the MLS, actually up in the top corner. You'll see that there are these little icons actually above the address, one of which is a little paperclip, and that's referred to as attachments. That's where an agent would attach any disclosures or addenda that would be required. And so that's a really great tool to be using to make sure that your client has a firm understanding of the property prior to making that offer. Consider what times in the home will transfer or convey to the buyer. So understanding whether or not fixtures will be included, what appliances are going to be included. We get a lot of this information naturally from the MLS, so that's something to be aware of. You're going to be able to also make sure of the time itself, right, of when we actually want for the seller to accept and when there will be closing. Earnest money. So the buyer makes a deposit to the seller to show good faith in the transaction. The earnest money is typically deposited in an escrow account that is jointly held, which is not the case for us, right? So that is something that is held by a third party. So escrow company is going to be a third party unless there's another situation, which very likely doesn't happen, especially in Florida. So understanding that with earnest money, this is going to be a down payment that can be in good faith. Now, there are two opportunities that you can do. You can do an initial earnest money deposit as well as an additional deposit. And so many people suggest that you put a fairly nominal amount prior to inspection and then put a much larger amount after inspection if you're looking for your earnest money or your down payment to be one of the contenders to make your offer stronger. That absolutely can be there. People ask the question, what's the amount that should be put down for earnest money? There is no rule of thumb. You'll hear some people will do 1%. You'll hear some people do 5%. It really, again, it kind of depends. With that being said, that's the suggestion where maybe if you know that your client is going to be putting or needs to put 3.5% down for the down payment on the property, you might put 1% or you might put a fairly nominal amount as the initial deposit, and then after inspection, they might put the remaining 3.5% down. Again, there is no particular rule of thumb. It just has to be a certain amount that both buyer and seller agree that is a good faith deposit to not accept anyone else's offer. Time for acceptance. So please understand that time for acceptance, sometimes people like to put 24 hours. I generally believe in putting 48 hours. Again, there's no particular rule of thumb. Just know that some people have to move mountains, right? So I have, in the past, have had clients that are a corporate account, right? So it's a for-profit arm of a non-for-profit, and that means that there's a lot of bureaucracy. So you're sending me a document, I have to send it to the Florida rep, I also have to send it to the underwriter. When those two approve, then it goes up to a senior vice president. That senior vice president signs off on the documents. That takes a process. So to give me until tomorrow at noon, I'm probably not going to be able to do that for you. On the opposite, I've also had clients where they were in Peru, and literally we had to email to their niece, and their niece had to download the documents and print them out and take them up a mountain to these sellers. They then signed everything and had to go back down to the niece's house, where then she would go down into the city to find a scanner that she could then scan it back over to us in the United States. That is not going to happen in 24 hours. So being in a normal situation, giving someone 48 hours and just having a conversation around what that looks like can be really helpful. The financing terms. So if your client has already been pre-approved, what type of financing are they going to be doing? Do not submit a pre-approval letter that is a conventional pre-approval letter if your client themselves is actually not intending to do conventional at all, right? This is not where you can check multiple boxes and then figure it out later. Whether it's a VA, FHA, conventional loan, or cash is going to have a big determining factor, or is at least a large determining factor on what the seller is considering, especially if you're in a multiple offer situation. So understanding what that looks like, as well as what the down payment looks like, right? Just because someone is offering a certain price, but they're offering 50% down, that can be a huge win for your client for peace of mind, especially when it comes to appraisals. So understanding some guidelines about writing an offer. This is talking about a cover letter. So you can do a cover letter. You can also do this in an email format, right? Kind of like a summary synopsis of what that's going to look like. You know, hey, Eve, this is Micheal Reedy. Please find the Smith's offer attached to this email. Quick breakdown of the terms: purchase price $265, earnest money $3,000, inspection period 7 days, expected closing date June 15th. Any of the terms that would be there: seller concessions, buyers asking 3% seller concessions, or buyers asking no concessions. If you have any questions, please let me know, right? I mean, it's a way to send an email to someone, because as a listing agent, I'm immediately going to look at page 1. I'm going to look at page 2, and then I'm going to look at the very last page. Because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for purchase price, earnest money, type of financing, when the closing date is, inspection period, and are there any additional terms for seller concessions. So that's kind of the first big assumption that I'm going to be doing. And so by getting an email that has a summary of the breakdown, kind of the big rocks of the contract, that just is a more professional and smoother, you're being a resource for that agent, which can be very helpful, especially when they are to translate that to their clients on what are the big takeaways from it. But you can also do a cover letter like this, which is explaining specifically why the client is attracted to the property. I would be careful about this because sometimes you're going to show your clients cards. I know that there are some people on here who love when their client sends a cover letter. And so, you know, Molly and Travis absolutely adore this house. They can see their invisible children playing in the backyard that they haven't even conceived yet. And so to me, if you're going to send me that cover letter, but then you're also going to make a ridiculously low offer, then what you're potentially putting yourself into a place, depending on who the listing agent is, if they're like myself, then I'm going to say, well, you seemed very motivated about this. You probably have a little bit more earning potential. And so now I need to know some specifics, right? I'll give a perfect example. And I shared this story on a power up with Reedy and Red a couple of weeks ago. Doug recently got a property under contract. It was a listing that he had in a condo. So condos, secondary homes have definitely had a little bit of a hit. And so these clients are in Chicago and they loved the unit. And the woman has, she believes that there's a good omen. So while they were there, while their agent was actually recording the showing, manatees showed up right underneath the unit because it's a waterfront unit that overlooks a marina. So she saw those manatees and it was absolute fate, right? Because the last home that she purchased in Chicago, there was a deer that walked through the backyard when she bought that house. Now pause for a moment. As a negotiator, what do you think that I, helping on the listing side, did with that information? Go ahead and put that in the chat box. So Kelly said, used it to your advantage, knew that they had to have it. Yeah, so when you made an offer, right, that was significantly less than what the property was being offered at, then we knew that you had already put an emotional attachment. Because remember the bold law, logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. So since the tell was the emotion that was around these manatees, which mind you, have nothing to do with the actual property, they're kind of an added bonus, an added perk, that was absolutely helpful to bring their price up by pretty much $11,000 instantly, right? So using some of this information, that's why I just err on the side of caution when you do some of these things, because of the fact that it can sometimes work against you, right? So go ahead and put in the chat box, what do you think are some buyer offer objections, right? So what do you think are some objections that the buyer might have towards making a particular offer on a property? Okay, so Bo said construction repairs. What else? Closing costs, okay. Bo said financing terms, all right. So remember, this is the buyer's objection. So what could you imagine some of the buyers having a problem with before making an offer on a seller's property? Okay, yeah, appraisal. I'm not going to pay more than what it appraises for, or I don't want to pay full price. Yeah, we can absolutely have a time frame around the money itself. What else? So one of the things that can be really helpful for you, especially if you find yourself in a situation where you're having this conversation beforehand, is to understand that for many people, you're going to be able to probably think of the objections that they're going to have even before you actually get them, so that you can be having a conversation or you can be drafting the way that you're going to handle those objections, right? Remember, our whole job is to anticipate their needs. So by knowing the questions that they're going to ask, by knowing some of the things that would be there, that is how you can anticipate those needs and deliver on an even better level. So understanding when we present the offer to the listing agent, just like I said, so notify the listing agent of an incoming offer. Please, please, please pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and let them know. Hi, Bo, this is Micheal Reedy. Just wanted to give you a quick call. We just showed your property. Insert the name. Don't assume that listing agents only have one property. We just showed your property, 1519 Linwood Drive. Looks like my clients are very interested. I'm going to be heading back to the office and writing an offer. Do you by chance have any other offers that have been presented? And so the reason for this is that if you do not notify the agent, and the agent just assumes, especially in today's market, right, we can have 13 showings and not hear anything. As a listing agent, if I don't hear anything from you, I assume that your client isn't interested. So if we did receive one offer and yet it wasn't from you, and I have no idea that your client is interested, then I'm going to present it to my seller. That is, hey, we have this offer. What would you like to do with it? But if I know because you called me, even if you called me in the evening, letting me know that an offer is going to be coming in first thing in the morning, then I might be able to stall, depending on the time of acceptance, I might be able to stall long enough so that my seller can make an informed decision based on both of the offers. So letting them know that you're going to be sending an email and that you'll follow up when it's in their inbox. So you send the offer to the agent via email. Text them and let them know, hey, Bo, just want to let you know that offer is in your email. Thanks so much, right? I mean, it is quick and simple, but it's a way for me to know. I don't always check my email. I don't always know, I have 3 or 4 emails right now that I check between Keller Williams, Coastal Elite Group, Leverage Desk, and my other business that for me, I'm not always looking just at the real estate business, the sales business all the time. So give me a heads up. Hey, this email's coming in. Okay, fantastic. Then you set a deadline, right? So the deadline is by tomorrow. Well, by when tomorrow? Because based on time as defined by the FAR contract, time could be identified as 11:59 p.m., right? So if you want to know so today is Wednesday, so you say you have until Friday at 5 p.m., right? So be very specific. Do not put 48 hours in the time of acceptance. 48 hours from when? When did the clock start? So by saying Friday by 5 p.m., you're setting a deadline on what that looks like. Then you're going to create the offer itself in Command. And this is a great opportunity for you to be able to go through, already make sure an opportunity has to be set up. So when you go into Command on the icons that are on the left-hand side, there's one that says opportunities. In opportunities, you must create an opportunity, whether it's a buyer opportunity or seller opportunity. If you're presenting an offer to a listing agent, then you would be creating a buyer opportunity. And then in there is when you would start the offer process, right? And then consult with your buyer when the seller responds. So once we actually do get a response, whether the seller is accepting, countering, or rejecting, then that's where we can let the buyer know where we're at. So I think I've already kind of role modeled a little bit of this through to you on picking up the phone, shooting over the text message or the email. My email is I've shared with you before, but it's very simple. Hi, Bo. Please find the Smith's offer attached to this email again, and then purchase price, closing date, financing terms, escrow amount, inspection period, any seller concessions. Please let me know if you have any questions. Looking forward to working with you. Sincerely, Michael. Email goes out, text message. Hey, Bo, just want to let you know the offer from the Smiths has been submitted to your email. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Now we're done, right? It has been sent over to the agent. You know, Bravo TV and Millionaire Listing shows that we now go to this process where, you know, the agents meet over margaritas and then we're discussing offers. And so then I get a counter from you and I say, hold on, and I go step outside and I call my client. We don't do that, right? We really don't do that. So understanding from this process, more often than not, also by having the conversation with the agent on the other side, the agent knows whether or not you're competent, whether or not you have your stuff together, whether or not this is going to be difficult, right? So understanding this process can make it very, very simple for yourself, for your client, and for the agent and seller on the opposite side. Bo said, love how you can guide the conversation to get your goal accomplished. Absolutely. Always, 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 right? So understanding what this process looks like. So representing the seller on the opposite side, and I am going to speak a little bit to this. So we receive the offer. We're going to gather some information about the buyer. We're going to present the offer to the seller, and then we're going to respond to the offer. So understanding, reviewing the offer, make sure that the address is actually the correct address. Check the price to see whether or not it falls within the range of the seller's expectations. Remember, I had a conversation with the seller at the beginning, which was, okay, what is the price that you'd like to list it at? What is the price that you do not want to go below? So if I see that the answer is below, then we have a little bit of a challenge. For earnest money, make sure that the money that is being amount is acceptable to the seller. So an idea of this is, imagine if it's $1 million property and someone's putting $1,000 down in escrow. Do you think that it bothers someone at all to lose $1,000, right? So escrow should be an amount that hurts just a little bit. It doesn't have to hurt a lot, but obviously someone has no problem throwing away $500 or $1,000 sometime, and yet they have no problem wasting the seller's time, right? We can get past inspection, we can get through all that and then just walk away and lose our $1,000. Well, who cares? Because it really wasn't that much comparatively to the property. So again, making sure that it's an amount that works for your seller. It's not about your opinion. It's not your opinion of how much earnest money matters to you. It is what matters to the seller. So time of acceptance, see how long that the seller has to respond, and understand that sometimes you might have to set expectations. I've done this. We get an offer, the time of acceptance is way less than what I can do. And so I'm just transparent. And I say, hey, listen, I see your time of acceptance. I might need a little bit more time. I'll definitely let you know through this process. If I can get it done, I will. But I might need a little bit more time to actually get signatures. So pre-approval, actually verify that the buyer is pre-approved by a lender. So if you get a pre-approval letter, you call the lender. Hey, this is Michael Reedy. I've just received an offer from a client that says that they're working with you. I just wanted to see where they were in the process, right? Oh, they filled out a 5-minute survey. I have actually not spoken to them yet. It was just a preliminary approval letter that they got. We have actually not received any financial documents. We have nothing. Well, how strong is that pre-approval? It's not. So it's very helpful for you to go ahead and call that lender. It's also to find out whether or not that lender is on the ball. right? So there are some lenders that are going to they're not even going to drop the ball. They're never going to pick it up. And you as a listing agent are going to have to do twice the work, right? Loan approval. Please make sure that the loan approval date or the financing commitment date is less than the closing date, right? So we had this where we received an offer. It was supposed to close in 28 days, and yet the loan approval time was 40 days on the contract. That doesn't work for our clients. That means that all the way up until the very end, if they don't get loan approval, they are still able to do that. Kelly said, is a lender ever hesitant to give that approval info, confidentiality? I'm not asking about whether or not the person makes a certain amount of money or the probability that the person will close. I'm asking, where are they in the process? Have you gathered any financial information to make an informed decision, or was this basically a quick survey? Because Kelly, understand that for some people, literally picking up the phone, they go, how much do you make? Oh, I make $100,000. Okay. How much are you paying for your rent right now? How much are you paying for your car? Any kind of debts that you have? Because they're off the cuff just trying to figure out your debt to income ratio. Well, then they get under contract and we get to the place, and then we realize that the gentleman who said that he makes $100,000 a year is true. The problem is that he's self-employed and he writes off everything. So his taxes only show that he makes about $32,000. $32,000 is something that a lender cannot lend to someone who was actually making $100,000, right? So we have to be very careful with this process. That's why we ask those questions. Kimberly said, why wouldn't the buyer's agent make sure that the pre-approval letter is legitimate? Well, hopefully they do. And ultimately, I am taking the initiative because I'm either going to do the work on the front end or I'm going to do the work on the back end. If I do the work on the back end, we are scrambling, we're rushing, we have to settle sometimes for different things. My seller's already packed up, my seller is pissed off. Now my seller is pissed off at me because I didn't do my job to make sure that this was a smooth transaction. And that can be a really big no-no. So I'd rather do the 5-minute phone call on the front end than make it all the way to the end. The other part is, and quite frankly, this is going to sound rude, is that not all agents are professional. So I cannot depend on my job that the person on the other side is competent. You know, the threshold for some people to get their real estate license is very low. And both financially and intellectually. And I don't mean this by anyone who has a problem taking tests or any of that. I'm just saying that the level of professionalism for some people is all over the place. And so I just want to make sure that I do my job because I was hired by the seller to make this deal happen. And that's what I'm going to do. Financing terms. So making sure that the financing terms are agreeable to the seller, right? Seller's not going to accept owner financing if that's not what they want to do. Seller is maybe not wanting certain things, whether it's FHA or what have you, because they're fearful of whatever that might look like. Now, most of that is a myth, right? So some people believe that, oh, well, if I get an FHA or VA loan, well, then the appraisal is going to come in lower than if it's conventional. That's not true. FHA and VA have their own forms that have to be filled out by an appraiser. They are looking for slightly different guidelines, but they're fairly nominal. And really, we can't set a term based on that. Now, granted, if offer one shows that someone's putting 50% cash down with no appraisal contingency, and offer two is 100% financing with an appraisal contingency, which one do you think that a seller might go for? Now, it's not always true, but again, someone might say, well, it's a sure bet that the person who has $150,000 in cash is probably going to be more financially secure than someone who's asking for 100% financing, including closing costs, right? So again, that could be an assumption, but that is what sometimes can happen. A closing date. So make sure that the closing date on the offer will actually work with your seller's schedule. We've had sellers that are older and they don't really have assistance. And so because they don't have assistance, they have to do everything themselves. And so the idea of closing in 2 weeks or 3 weeks and moving a house of 30 years worth of stuff, that might not bode well for them. They might need 45 days or 60 days. And so we might be able to find where a buyer's not in a particular rush, and it might be a win-win for them to have a little bit of an extended closing. Again, reviewing the information on the front end is going to make it a lot easier on the back end. So notify the seller, let them know that we're receiving an offer. And you want to make sure that you're doing this in a perspective that shows a positive and receptive offer. Now imagine if we get an offer that's $15,000 less than what our purchase price is, or rather what our offer price is. And so you pick up the phone, you call the seller and you say, hey, Kimberly, it's Michael. So we received an offer. I know it's not what you wanted, but let's go over it. I've already set that offer up with a negative connotation, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to say, hey, Kimberly, it's Michael. Just wanted to give you a quick call. Congratulations, we've received an offer on the property. I'm going to be sending them over to you so that you can go ahead and review, and then I'm going to give you a call back so that we can go through it together. All right? Fantastic. So we're going to let them know that that's what it is. Again, I've gone through the pre-qualifying section and saying, how would you like me to present the offer? Would you like us to set up a time for me to come and meet you and we go line by line through? Or would you prefer that I send it to you electronically and then we review it together? More often than not, they're like, oh, you can send it over electronically, that's fine. And then we can go over it via Zoom or phone or whatever that looks like. So you can absolutely do that. Update the CMA. So put the offer into the perspective of the given market. So remember, Kimberly, when you and I were speaking and we talked about pricing the home, I told you that really based on the comparative market analysis that we're going to be somewhere between the 275,000 and probably 295,000 any given way. And we've received an offer for 280,000. So that is in our range of what we said we would be able to get for the property. Now let's look at some of the closer details. Based on the thing, came in at 280,000. They do have a 7-day inspection period. I have spoken to the buyer's agent and have figured out that this person really loves the property, right? They saw Manatee and they saw an old high school fling that they always wanted to rekindle that relationship, lives 5 doors down, whatever it might be, and they have no seller contingencies. So ultimately, we are only about $10,000 or so off of our purchase price. What would you like to do? Would you like to accept the offer as it is? Would you like to counter the offer with maybe something in the middle or finding something else? Or would you like to reject the offer outright? Right? So we're able to frame it from that perspective and get them to a place in understanding. So again, we respond to the offer or we make a decision. So we're accepting the offer as is. We are countering the offer. And so countering the offer looks like many things. One of the things that I like to do is have a conversation with the seller and just, again, let them know what that looks like. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what we received. There are some contingencies. I can clarify, right? So buyers asked for 3% of seller concessions to pay for the buyer's closing costs. I can absolutely ask the agent if that's a want or a need. The agent is not required to answer that question at all. However, more often than not, when I ask that question, I usually get the answer that I'm looking for. And so that might help us better understand where we're at. So let's say, we're at 290,000. They're offering 285 with 3% seller concessions towards buyer's closing costs. I pick up the phone and I say, hey, Kelly, it's Michael. Thank you so much for the offer. I've been reviewing it and I just have some clarifying questions that'll really help me be able to present this to the seller as best as possible. So I see here that the buyer is requesting seller concessions for closing costs. could you tell me, is that a want or a need? And 90% of the time, probably 99% of the time, the agent will immediately tell me, oh, well, it's kind of a want. I mean, they're already putting a lot of money down. They'd really like to save some money, but that's kind of where they're at. They would prefer not to have to put out all that money in the front end. Okay, or they absolutely need it. That it's non-negotiable. This is what they want. Okay, and so then we have an option, right? We can say, well, one of two things can happen. Well, actually, a couple things can happen. We can either accept it for what it is. The seller might say, well, listen, we're at 290. We'll accept 285. So we're netting 285, but we're not going to give seller concessions. Or sometimes, depending on the situation and where you've priced the home, and if you're confident that it would appraise, sometimes I will actually have that conversation and I'll say, Kelly, I appreciate the offer. My client appreciates the offer. I see that your client really wants the closing cost, and my client really believes that they have priced the home correctly. And because of the fact that they feel like they've priced the home correctly, they also don't necessarily feel that they should be losing any net on the property because your seller, or your buyer rather, can't really afford their closing cost. So what I'd like to suggest is a win-win. My seller gets what they want, and your buyer gets what they want, which is the seller concessions for the closing costs. So how about rewriting the offer, or I can counter, whatever that looks like, rewriting the offer at 103% so that my sellers get 100% of asking, and your clients are able to finance that 3% over the course of the next 30 years. That way they're only paying about $20 a month for the money that they would have been spending out of pocket, and they're able to keep that money and buy furniture or do the things that they want to do. Of course, there'll be an appraisal contingency, but that feels a little bit more like a win-win, right? And so that's how we can negotiate in those situations, especially in a time like today when almost everybody who's FHA is asking for closing costs, or VA is asking for closing costs. So you will find that sometimes those will be kind of your points of contention when it comes to negotiation. Or then they just reject the offer. And if they do reject the offer, please just don't respond, or please just do not respond. I know it's a double negative, but please don't leave the buyer's agent in the dark. Hey, just want to let you know the seller's not even interested in your offer. Thank you. It's much better than just ghosting. Please do not ghost on anyone that you work with in this industry. It's not cute, and it's really unprofessional. So at least let the buyer's agent know, listen, they're not even interested. Quite frankly, they've let me know that if it doesn't start with a 9, they're not even really going to entertain this offer. And then the buyer can go with that information and do something with it. Again, it's not your decision. Oh, I'm not even going to present this offer to my seller. It is completely disrespectful. No, as a listing agent, that's not your job. Your job is to present all offers, and that's pretty much it. So we really want to make sure that we're having that conversation and that people understand what that looks like, right? I've kind of already shown you a couple different ways of how we respond. Again, same thing. If it is accepted, Kimberly, congratulations. The sellers have accepted your buyer's offer. I have attached the fully executed contract. Here are a few other things that we have. I'd like to introduce you to my transaction coordinator, who's going to be taking over from here, as well as I have CC'd the title company so that you can coordinate with them on what to do with escrow. If you have any questions, please let me know. However, from this point forward, contractually, if you have any anything that you need signed or whatnot, please coordinate with my transaction coordinator, Echo. Thanks so much. Have a great day, right? Like, you're setting up the expectations of a smooth transaction. And so that is one of the great things that you can do through this process. All right, so let's do a recap here and see what this looks like, right? Which is, how has your thinking changed? What ideas or mindsets were new for you? And what was meaningful to you today? Let's see. So Kelly said, Bo said, I like being able to answer questions for clients prior to them asking. Absolutely. Kimberly said she really liked the idea of calling the lender about the pre-approval. Kelly Reynolds says, I like the idea of creating a summary. I think it's nice for all parties involved in the transaction. I can't agree more. Thank you for that. Bo, think it's super important to have good material that has the frequently asked questions built in. It helps to hear you talk through the process to see what objections might come up and how to handle them. Absolutely. And then Kelly said, it's all new to me. It's comforting to see again all the necessary info that is in Ignite, helpful to see how you handle situations through role play as well. And then Kelly Reynolds also likes the closing cost negotiation scenario. Great. Way more talkative today than earlier this week. So glad that you all are here and present and ready to go. Absolutely. I mean, this is a key part of the process. And yet until we lead generate, until we have clients, all of this is unnecessary. Not that it's unnecessary, but it's irrelevant. So before you get caught up, Bo, in the frequently asked questions and building a homemade version of that, not that you're going to, make sure that you're doing those key fundamental activities, that is to attract clients. It's very easy to be able to partner with a mentor or with your coach if you have particular questions and grab that resource in a few minutes, then go down the rabbit hole of building some new document and not do the key activities, which is to lead generate and lead follow-up, right? Linda says clients do need guidance, sometimes hard for them to know what is a reasonable offer. That is very true. And so we go back to remember the conversation that we had, right? Remember the conversation that we had in the very beginning when I told you that this was the information, or instead of that I told you, let's review the data, right? Let's review the data to make sure that what we're doing is making a competent decision, right? And so a lot of clients want to defer to price per square foot, which we do not do in St. Pete unless it's a condominium or a master plan community. And even then, if it's an older master plan community, then the amenities and the upgrades can be all over the place, right? So just having that conversation and understanding what that looks like can be really important to you, right? What else? What else? Any other action steps or activities do you intend to do this next week, taking this information to be helpful for you? So Linda just said, yes, she sees the importance of setting the expectations up front. Absolutely. All right, folks, so we have new script partners today. So I do want to make sure that you go into the script link. So I want to make sure that I grab that link for you. Please make sure it is editable. Please make sure that you have your phone number in there so that your partner is going to be able to call you. Kimberly, I see you in here. I know that on the Google Sheet, I do not have your cell phone on there. So please, it looks like this week, your script partner is going to be Linda Anderson. And so Linda's phone number is there. If you would just give her your phone number as well so that the two of you can connect. It is 9:54. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the next 35 minutes because we weren't able to do script practice yesterday. We're going to take the next 35 minutes to be focused on doing your script practice. Please take an opportunity for both of you to go through a script and work together diligently through this process. And we're going to come back together at 10:30, see if there's anything in particular that you want to role play, and then we'll get into our lead generation. If you have any questions, put it in the chat box. If not, I'll see you at 10:30.